Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining one of Transition US's online events. And our principal aim is to provide practical support to the leaders of transition initiatives, those mulling over starting an initiative, and community leaders working on resilience building within their communities. And I'm Caroline Staten, co-director of Transition US. So let me, without further ado, roll into the teleseminar today called Sustaining a Transition Group. And the group that is talking about this today is Sustainable Northeast Seattle. They're the 19th official U.S. transition initiative in the U.S. They find themselves gearing up for their 5th anniversary. They're bigger and more active than ever. So how does such a group like this navigate the evolving dynamics of keeping an organization active during different phases of its lifetime and honor its internal transition? How does a group in a large city compete with the myriad activities and special interest groups that are available? How does the group balance awareness raising with the creation of tangible projects, including an annual skills fair, garden parties, community gardens, and their newest venture, the Northeast Seattle Tool Library? So we'll be hearing from leaders from the steering committee for a conversation today about what has worked, what hasn't worked in maintaining and growing the organization, and how their own perceptions and goals have shifted along the way. With us today we have Susan Gregory, Joanne Kerr, and Leo Brody, who have all served on the steering committee of Sustainable Northeast Seattle, having been actively involved since its founding in May 2008. They authored the Transition Handbook Discussion Guide, which I know has been translated into a number of languages, and it accompanies the Transition Handbook. Most recently, they've helped launch the Northeast Seattle Tool Library. So I'm turning it over to you three to find out, again, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are your successes and your struggles, and what can we, as a listening audience, learn from this and take home and try in our own communities. So over to you three.
Thank you, Caroline, for the introduction. This is Joanne Kerr.
This is Leo Brody.
And I'm Susan Gregory.
I think what I would like to say to start off is for those people who are out there in the mulling category and the just getting started is when we started almost 5 years ago, we came together because we had a passion for the things that we believed in that would help with climate change. And we didn't have any prior experience to running community organization or anything like that. So just let me get that up right there at the beginning. We were not professional organizers in any way, shape, or form. And I think that over the years we have learned to sort of watch ourselves to not try to take off too big a bite for any particular project. We started off, I think, doing that. We'd want this huge blast of people to show up, and everything had to be big quantities and big numbers of people and a lot of hoo-ha. And we've learned that we have to sort of step back and take it day by day, step by step. Every project we do, every event that we hold, every meeting that we have, there are small measured successes in every one of those things, and that all toll, they have allowed us to keep growing, continue to have a constant energy level, as opposed to sort of just getting overwhelmed in one big flurry and feeling like, that was a disaster. We shouldn't do this anymore. Just taking it little bits at a time. Leo uses an analogy of a garden, which I think is appropriate for us. When you plant a garden and you put a variety of plants in it, you have to feed the soil first and get the soil good and strong. And that's what we try to start with, is just starting to get people to know who we were, start to make it very clear that we didn't have all the answers, that we were looking to the community for their energy and their passion and their thoughts and ideas about what could solve certain situations or make improvements in our lives and keep us thriving, that we weren't coming to the garden with all of the solutions. And then as we started to bring people in and they joined our efforts, sometimes the efforts were useful and helpful and grew and became ongoing efforts, like the different guilds that we have that have popped up around, say, gardening or community kitchen or emergency preparation. And then we've had some other efforts that they worked once or twice and then they sort of went into dormancy, I guess would be the best word if I'm going to stick with the garden analogy. And then there have been some things that have just taken off. They've, been hugely successful. And so we try to just take it all in as little steps toward a bigger picture. We are not, if anyone were to ask us what our end goal is, which is, getting everybody off fossil fuel, and we are a resilient community, I'd say we have a ways to go before we get there. This is a big city, and we aren't there yet. But our community is, I feel like it's a strong group of people. We care about each other. We're close. We're friends. We feel trust. And I think all of those things are what we've put our focus on more than worrying about whether people understand all of the scientific facts and peak oil facts and climate change facts. They get all of that information, and that's heavy, and it takes up too much energy and mind space. We try to spend more time focusing on building our community, caring about each other, spending time together, enjoying one another. And as we do those good projects that we work on, all of those things get built up, and the other comes along as a icing on the cake. Anybody want to throw something?
One of the things that's been really good for us from the beginning is that we've tried to organize events that were very practical and hands-on and visible in the community. Some of us in the beginning, when we first got started, went to a training with an organization called the Pomegranate Center, which some of you may have heard of. And the guy, Milenko Matinovic, who teaches there, talked about something that they call chainsaw moments. And chainsaw moment is when you fire up the chainsaw or whatever it might be. And in doing that, people are interested to see what the heck is going on over there. And so they'll come around, and then you have a chance to interact with those people and tell them about what you're doing. So one of the first projects we did was actually in Joanne's yard, where she had a front yard with the typical lawn. And we kind of had to nudge her a little bit, and her husband, Denny, to say, let's build a garden in your front yard because you've got all this grass, so it would be really cool. And so a bunch of us just got together and went over there, and we did this. We did a combination of removing sod and sheet mulching, and so while we were doing that, people on her street came by and they were like, "What the heck is going on here?" And some of them joined in, and I remember one guy who was like, "Oh, I have a bunch of leaves in my backyard," because we needed all these leaves to do the sheet mulching project. And so over time, and then we made a video of that, and that's on our website. It's called Lawn Gone. Leo did that video, and so it just was a lot of attention getting, and in doing that, then people would learn about what our mission was and why the heck are we doing this, and what's the point, of having a garden. So that's just one example of a chainsaw moment. Another project we started really early on. We had a guy in our neighborhood who is involved in Solar Cookers International, and he came by. I think we had a garden tour, and he came by the garden tour, and he was like, "You guys might be interested in knowing about solar cookers." And he had a solar cooker in the trunk of his car, and he pulled it out, and we just thought, "Wow, that would be a really cool event to learn how to make solar cookers." And so he came to my house, and a handful of people came, and we made these solar ovens or solar cookers out of cardboard and tinfoil. And then later on in the summer, in July, we had our first solar cookout, and we did it on actually a busy street in Seattle, where people would be driving by or walking by, and we set our solar cookers out there, and we started cooking food about noon, and then around 5:30 or so, we had this amazing potluck of all this food that was cooked on solar ovens. And it was a lot of fun. It was community building. We get to know each other a little bit. We're doing this, cooking without power. But then people are coming by. They're walking by from the bus and kind of, some people will just sort of peer in and go, "What's going on over there?" And others would just come right up and say, "What are you guys doing?" And in that way, learn about our organization, learn something about solar cooking. Maybe they, are really excited about it. Like one woman, Linda Stein, who came, and she was so excited about solar cooking that she learned how to make the ovens and is now kind of the main teacher of how to make these solar cookers. And she's been very involved in our organization ever since. And she's kind of the go-to person for solar ovens. She's taught that at a lot of different places. And every time she goes to teach, she's talking about Sustainable Northeast Seattle, so people learn about our organization that way as well. Let's see.
Every one of our events is sort of an effort to try and combine both the awareness and the fun project and the be in the moment kind of thing. So we try to take every opportunity to just talk about Sustainable Northeast Seattle, what our mission is, what our values are, but we try to do it in a way that's not hitting people over the head. They're sort of doing it as an experience in it as much as hearing about it at the same time. You want to say something, Lee? It looks like you're going to start talking.
Sure. As Joanne said, the kind of everything we do, we're looking at it from the perspective of what would appeal to people that would be in line with the mission. What can we do that's actually adding resilience to the community, but also has a kind of appeal so that we can draw more people in. Because as Joanne said, it's this idea of, in order to do the bigger projects like a tool library, to get to that point, you have to have a kind of a base of people to rely on to help get that energy going. Because all the energy of what we do, since it's a volunteer operation, comes from the energy of people who are willing to do it. And so you kind of have to get the ball rolling by just doing awareness raising. And I think when we first started, we primarily were doing more awareness raising activities like showing movies, just having general meetings on topics like gardening. And we had one of the first things we did was the edible garden tour, where we went from house to house with people could just show their gardens. And they were fairly simple events that didn't take a lot of energy to pull off, but every one of those added to the number of people that were added to the base of people that were interested, and so we would just build from that. Another thing we did, which I don't know that a lot of other groups do, is we made a point of having one meeting every month, a general meeting, meaning it was not a meeting just for those of us who said, "Oh, we're part of this group," but it was something where we would advertise it, promote it, put out posters, and try to have a topic that would appeal to people. And we'd put out our signs on the sidewalk all over town and posters up in the coffee shops and things like that to try to get people to come to, "Oh, well, I want to hear about spring tips for gardening," or "I want to hear about saving energy in my house," or whatever. So that's actually, it hasn't been that much work, but it is a consistent thing that we've been doing, to put on one of these events every month.
Another thing that we found really helpful, and I think they talk about it in the Transition Handbook, is partnering with other community organizations. And especially in a city like Seattle, where, I mean, every other person here probably identifies themselves as green or environmental. So there's a lot of different groups working on different issues. The people that are working on getting ivy out of the forest, people that are working on the health of Puget Sound. I mean, there's just a million different things. And so rather than always trying to do things all on our own, we've reached out to other organizations to either have tables at our events, or we would have a table at their event, or we might work together. We've also partnered with the community centers, and that's been a really successful partnership for us. And we've been lucky enough that our city is so committed to these issues that that they've made a really good effort to let the community centers have our events at their place, and it's been a great partnership. Our first, I think one of the first things we did at the community center was actually building solar ovens, and so we had they gave us a space and helped us promote the event, and then we worked our way towards our first hands-on fair, which actually was a great success.
Hands-on fair is our annual reskilling fair, where we have maybe 40 different workshops going on throughout the day.
Right, and so that was also a great way to get more involvement, because sometimes people really are like, well, I don't really want to go to a meeting, but I really want to learn to make soap, or I want to learn to make cheese, and so we put out the call to people in our neighborhood, in our community, to say, what do you guys want to teach? What do you want to learn about? And it was an amazing first year of, I think we had 40 or 50 instructors. It was a really fun event. So people are not just learning to make baskets, but they're meeting Sue, who's teaching how to make baskets, and they're meeting each other. And we've just found over and over that the connections that people make when they're doing something together are just really, really happy connections. Whether they're working in a garden side by side or building a worm bin together, it just seems like a really great way for people to connect. It's not just sitting across a table and discussing something. When you're using your hands and your head and your heart together, those connections really last, we've found. So Hands-On was a great partnership between our community and the community centers and our organization, and it really went a long way toward. We got a lot of attention too, so it got picked up on the radio, I think, and so the word got out about that event. I think that was one of the first ones where we really, I think, our reach kind of got a little bit further out. So,
and that is now spinning off because the Hands-On event we've had 3 years in a row now has gotten popular enough that people ask, why do you guys only do this once a year? And of course, no one wants to try and do a fair constantly during the year. So we've spun it off to a new guild that is going to be reskilling throughout the year. And we have, because we've created these relationships with the community centers, we have several different churches in the area that love the work that we do. They offer their commercial kitchens to us to use, and their rooms for meeting spaces. The libraries are really gung-ho about what we do. And the Tool Library, the Northeast Seattle Tool Library, has also got a space in it, a workshop space. So we now have a variety of spaces to choose from to design classes that can be held throughout the year. And our goal is to have somewhere in the northeast part of Seattle a skill-building class going on every week of the year. And we'll build up the teachers from the list of people that have taught at our fair, as well as the people who have continued to sort of poke their heads up out of the weeds and said, hey, I know how to do such and such, and let me help with that. I can do that one time, a couple of times a year. That's great. And they love, every time we get a new person who's never taught before coming to teach, they are so pleased that they did it. They had no idea they had that capacity, and I think that's been one of the things that's been most rewarding, is watching the growth and the change that people experience as they get involved with their community. We have had several people who had limited friendship circles, and they really weren't doing very much. They weren't very involved, and they started to come to things that we do and projects that we do, and they're talking to people that they never would have talked to before in other circumstances, and they're feeling much more connected and plugged in to the community at large. And I think that that is the best way we have of trying to get our message out, is people feel a contentment and a trust and a connection to all of us, and talk about it with other people, bring their friends along. The community gardens have also served that purpose. They're out in very obvious places at, again, the parks, the city parks department, next to the community centers that Susan mentioned. And the communities come and work in those gardens, and the next time I go to a work party and there's people there that brought someone from their neighborhood to come work in the gardens. And we're starting to get calls from some of the PTAs and the schools that have science fairs and so forth, and they're asking us to participate at their science fairs so that they can tell kids, that we can tell kids about sustainability and resilience. Some of the community councils have asked us to come to their meetings and talk about what it is that we do. When we first started, because there are so many groups that have got interests in trying to get people's time, and people feel overwhelmed, there's no need for one more group, geez. Well, we came along, and some of the community councils felt a little threatened by us because they thought, we have a hard enough time getting people to come to our meetings. What are you going to do? You're going to take all of our people away. And it hasn't been like that at all, that we've had a much better relationship with those community councils than I think they realized, that people come to our meetings and they get engaged in what the community councils are doing. So it's been a really useful, healthy relationship.
A really interesting thing happens with people that we've noticed, and Joanne kind of alluded to this. One is that because of the way our society works, I think, and for whatever reason, most people don't consider themselves to be leaders, and they don't consider themselves to be really experts. And what they don't realize is that they have innate abilities, and they kind of downplay their own abilities. And so, for example, when we do the skills fair, what we're trying to do there is create a place where we can all share the things that we happen to have some expertise in with other people without having to rely on bringing in outside experts. So someone might know how to make cheese, someone else might know how to make baskets. They don't have to be experts. And so that's kind of the feeling that we want to create. And it takes a little prodding sometimes to get somebody who's good at making cheese or good at making baskets or whatever, or soap, to think of themselves as someone who could stand up in front of 10 people and share what they do. But we find that when we do prod them, they actually step into that and kind of realize this is cool, and they're seeing everybody else do it too. And the same thing kind of goes with the leadership, because we don't have a hierarchical organization here. We want everybody to feel like they can create their own projects and be leaders just as much as anybody else. But people feel reluctant because they don't want to, I don't know, it's a psychological thing. They're afraid of being bossy or something. So so we're trying to encourage that redefinition of what leadership means.
A good example of that was a couple years ago, one of our members came up to not one of us, but another person from our steering committee and said, well, you guys should have a fair like a Sustainable Ballard, and Ballard is is kind of the queen of sustainable neighborhood groups in Seattle. They've been going at it for a long time and have a really neat once-a-year sustainability fair. And Carol, this person in our group, was like, you guys should have one of those. And we were like, actually, you should be the one to since you're really interested in this, you be the one to sort of head it up. And she was very reluctant at first until we said, well, how about you be the head of it, and one of us will be with you and help you through it. And so she took it on, and we had a really fun the first big event that we had, we called it Planet Home, and we organized the fair was organized around rooms of the house and things you could do to save resources or energy in each room. So we had a garden, we had the garage, we had the office, the kitchen. In the living room, we had speakers there, and it was a really fun first event, which wouldn't have happened unless Carol had taken it on, because none of us were quite up for it.
One of the things that we have struggled with in all of our years of doing these events and projects is the consistent appearance of youth. And by youth, I mean people between 18 to, say, 28. They show up occasionally at hands-on. They were very engaged in that. There's a makers do-yourself group movement in this town that's pretty active, and they saw this sort of do-it-yourself opportunity at the hands-on fair, and they showed up. And of course, we're all curious about who we were and what was going on and so forth and so on, and we thought, okay, we've done it. We've finally tapped into that group. And so the next event we had, there weren't any of them there. So I'm not sure what happened there. We're still sort of trying to figure that out. But we continue to go work in the garden, and maybe one or two young people will show up. Oftentimes they're not there. Families the same way, because little kids have got so many different things to do, and their parents are sort of driving around and taking them to do things. Trying to plug into one more thing, it can be challenging. Occasionally we will get a whole bunch of little kids. We did an event last summer called City Goats, Chickens, and Bees, Oh My. We had everybody that we could find in the neighborhood that had livestock of some kind or some kind of critter activity that they wanted to talk about. We had them all come to one out in the open, very obvious location in the middle of our neighborhood. And lots and lots and lots of people showed up with their little kids. And little kids like to go where there are chickens, goats, bees, rabbits, birds, worms, bats, anything that's kind of creepy, crawly, wiggly, furry, and cute. So those events have worked for those smaller demographic groups. We haven't necessarily been able to keep them on an ongoing basis, and that is a challenge that we continue to work on. And will continue to work on, I'm sure, forever.
Right. It's interesting that people really want to engage in projects where they see tangible results and they feel like it's worth their time to put something into it. And in order for them to really have that feeling, it has to be more of a permanent thing. And so what we found is something like the Tool Library is now really running pretty much on its own with a whole new set of volunteers, many of whom were not involved with us before, but they just love the idea of the Tool Library, a lending library for tools. And so we have a whole crew of volunteers that are just very engaged in that. And as Joanne said, when you have something like a one-day or one-evening fair where you're bringing rabbits and things, it doesn't really create something that persists. It's kind of hard to, launch a guild off of something like that and make something that lasts. So, but nevertheless, it's still good to do it because it takes less time and energy to put on something like that. It's just that you have to keep doing those things and try to, and unfortunately, you're going to get different crowds. And you don't get a sustained enthusiasm. So what it seems like the formula is when you're starting out, you have to do as much small, manageable projects and try to get your name out there. And over time, you start to build more and more people, and they start coming to these things. And then you can start thinking about what could be really an ongoing project. And the Tool Library is an example for us.
I would say... this is a little bit of an aside, but Joanne is an excellent graphic artist, and because she's been involved from the beginning, we've had a really pretty strong graphic kind of a signature for our events, and I actually think that's helped a lot. So our logo is on posters around the city, and so I think that's a really something to consider as you're getting started is how you're representing yourself graphically. I think those things are really powerful. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the tool library. It's something I was involved in from the beginning, and this was a project that was we won a $50,000 award because one of the neighborhoods in Northeast Seattle reduced their waste the most, and so Cleanscapes, which is our garbage company, was giving out this $50,000 award for a community project, and so we proposed a tool library after having visited a tool library across town from us in West Seattle. And West Seattle was really an awesome partner in helping us get our library started. We just basically copied everything they did. But we were able to get this building through a partnership with another church in the neighborhood, a building that they weren't using, and the grant money went to fix it up. But the thing that has been most amazing about that is that we put out the call early on as we were getting started for tool donations, and we kind of figured we would get some donations, but that it would take us some time to build up our inventory of tools. And as soon as we were able to open our doors in January, it's been an amazing thing to see the tools kind of flowing in, sort of like a tsunami of tools. We can't even keep up with all of them. And we just we're entering into the inventory last week up to 1,600 now in just a few short months. And some of the tools are small things, and we have a lot of certain tools, like we have a really beautiful collection of pipe wrenches, which nobody has so far borrowed, but we also have some really nice power tools, electric lawnmowers, and really pretty full. A couple pressure washers that have come in. And so that's just been a really gratifying thing to see how people have responded to that project. And the neat thing about it is that it's very visible. It's near a busy street. We were able to get a huge sign that Joanne designed that's now up, and people are noticing it and walking by. And again, sort of similar to the chainsaw moment, only an extended moment of visibility for the tool library and for Sustainable Northeast Seattle. So having a space that we can now use for classes and to sort of hold our organization a little bit has been really, really a great thing. And the neat thing about churches is that they often do have space and that isn't used, and many churches are in line with the goals of an organization like this one. So that's been a really positive relationship to have, and we now have several churches in the neighborhood that we consider our friends. So that's really good.
We're multi-denominational. So I want to talk just a little bit about how we're organized, and we kind of follow a model. Well, it's a pretty simple model, and a lot of it comes out of the transition training. But we have a steering committee that has different number of people, but it's about 8. I think right now it's 8, and we meet twice a month, and our main focus is this issue of how do we keep the momentum going, how do we keep focused, how do we keep growing awareness and attracting people, how do we keep being inclusive, and how do we try to cover all the different realms that transition wants to cover, keeping all of that in mind. We try not to do a lot of the actual planning of things other than the monthly meeting that I talked about earlier. So we try, for example, when we have the barter fair, we want that to be some other group that's doing it. We created a guild called the Celebration Guild to manage the Planet Home event. And as Susan said, we have Carol, who is willing to take that on. And the Tool Library is its own guild, and there's multiple guilds for, there's an Urban Farmer Guild, there's a Permaculture Guild. There are 2 different guilds that are each responsible for a community garden at one of the community centers, and those are beautiful gardens that their local neighborhoods come and support. So we're trying to distribute the power or the control and decision-making and leadership energy, so it's not just this group of 8 people. But having that group of people, that steering committee, meet twice a month really does, I think it explains why we're able to get so much done and get things happening. More recently, we're working on becoming a nonprofit so that we're actually legally a nonprofit. Right now we have a fiscal sponsor. And that's very interesting because we're trying to balance the whole thing about a legal structure with a board of directors and officers and everything that meets the criteria of a formal corporation, corporate form they call it. And at the same time keeps that spirit that we have now alive, where the control and the decision making is happening kind of at the grassroots level. So we're working on that.
And this is an area I just have to pipe in here. This is not an easy thing. This has been a really quite a struggle for us too, because we started out really sort of, amoeba-like with just, we were just making decisions on the fly, going, let's do this, and then we would just do it. And we kept, in the beginning, we kept our, a few quarters in a shoebox. That was our treasury, and when we needed to print posters, we went and got them. So we didn't really have a checking account or anything like that. We just were doing events on using a lot of recycled materials. So coming up with a more formalized structure has been an interesting process, and we're not done yet. It's taken quite a lot of effort and thinking and planning and talking again and talking some more, which we're all sort of getting tired of talking about it, but we're not done yet. So it's an area that if you do think about becoming a 501c3 and going through all of the bylaws writing, give yourself plenty of time to do those things. It takes some time.
Our members tell us when we ask them about this change in the structure that may be coming with bylaws and so forth, they're, no, please don't make it a bureaucratic thing where we have to wait for decisions to come down from on high or anything like that. So we're trying to be really aware of how much the grassroots really likes to participate in the whole process. They want to be asked to be in charge and take on things and make decisions and be able to decide how money is going to be spent for their particular guilds so that it's best used in the places it's needed. Not every guild needs money, and some of them need a lot more than the other ones do. So that's something that we have to keep aware of. We do not want to lose the people that have been very loyal and showing up and getting engaged, and we want to work them into leadership positions and have them feel empowerment, not squash that by laying a structure over the top of them that we have to do for legal reasons. But we're starting to get people who are interested in us from outside, other organizations. And one of the things they want to know is if you're serious, then it must mean if you're serious, you're a 501c3 or something that's got some roots of legality to you. So we're finding that the more important we become to our community, the more that will legitimize us by having that, yes, I want to call it an anchor, that standing with the IRS and the tax.
One thing that we just thought of, I'm changing the subject here, but after going for more than 4 years and having a lot more people come in and just seeing, oh, this is cool that you guys are doing all these things, we realized that people not there from the beginning who missed those movies that we were showing in the early days, they really didn't understand what our objective was. And so they didn't see how it all tied together. They didn't understand concepts like resilience and that sort of thing. So recently we started doing something that is like an orientation, except it's not just for new people. It's for the people who have already been here and not heard that kind of discussion. So it gives us a chance to not only describe the organization and how people can fit in, it also gives people a little bit of awareness of what, what does permaculture mean and that kind of thing, and without being overbearing about it. And one thing that came out of those meetings was an awareness of the problem that some people have fitting in when they come into a new organization. And the challenge for people is when they see something when they come to an event, let's say, and everybody seems organized, and it seems as if all the decisions are already handled and the people who are in charge are just in charge, they feel like they don't have a way to plug in. They don't even necessarily even feel welcome. And that is the total opposite of the feeling that we're trying to create. So some of these orientations made us aware of how important it is to leave space for new people to come in, and sometimes it's better to lay back, for the established leadership to lay back and not seem to be in charge of everything. To leave openings like, well, who's going to do this, or that kind of thing. So that was something that came out of the orientations. And I think we're going to, if we're ready, we just had some things that we noticed about the dynamic of those of us who have been working together for all this time on the steering committee, and other people as well. Things that seem to be helping us be a healthy organization, because we have disagreements about things. We don't always see things eye to eye, but we're friends, and that's kind of amazing after all this time that we're still a functioning group. And so it so happens that a lot of us have been in other groups, some of us in the same group, where things weren't functional. It was dysfunctional is the word. And so some of the things that we just want to point out to make a group that you want to look, it's especially true for the mullers and the people who are trying to start out. It's important to find people that are really committed to not just doing the visible things, but actually doing some of the groundwork of going off and talking to the different churches or the different community center directors. And there's a lot of work that's invisible that needs to happen. And you have to kind of know that you need to make that investment ahead of time, because if you aren't doing that, it's probably not going to stick. Another thing is to look for people who do think differently or have diversity in the way they solve problems. But you want to be careful, especially when you're getting started, that you make sure that everybody that you invite to be part of this group has the same goal. And because we have found with other groups that if people have slightly different objectives, they may seem compatible, but if they really don't get that kind of resilience building approach, and they maybe, for example, want to do more with politics or something, and or social justice or something where it's a little bit off. Not that those things aren't important, but it's like they should be in a different group. You need to make sure that everybody's in alignment, and then it becomes a conversation about strategically what's the best way to accomplish our goals. That's the interesting part. Another thing we noticed is that we don't second guess each other. So, for example, if someone says, I'm going to make a poster for this event, they go off and make the poster, and they send it to us to review and make sure there's no typos and that it's clear. But we don't go, oh, no, I'm going to make my own poster. We've actually been in groups where that's happened. People question the whole thing, or they veto it, or they say, oh, I think we can do better, or something like that. So if someone's doing something, we just trust that they'll do it, and we don't second guess. That makes things go a lot easier. Another thing I've noticed in conversation, when we're sitting around the table, this is a really key thing to look for, especially when you're picking people that you want to be working with, that whatever is said is something that advances the conversation. So, for example, you might have a different idea, we could do this, or you might have a question, like, well, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Or you might say, well, so-and-so said, or something like that. But it's any one of those things when you're asking a question or just putting out ideas, you're adding information. But the thing you want to watch out for is people who just say something like, well, I don't like that idea. Or, well, I don't think we're the right people to make that decision. Because when that happens, it completely stops the conversation. And then you get all into this yucky dynamic where you can't really go forward. And that, again, goes back to choosing the right people in the first place. And then the last thing is, I've heard a lot of conversation about what governance model should groups use. And there are some really great models for governance, like sociocracy and what's it called, dynamic governance. And I don't know a lot about them, but my impression is those are really great models for situations where you have conflict built in, like management versus labor. And you want to try to get everybody to the table and work forward to a solution that benefits everybody. But we don't really do that. We don't have any kind of formal model. We just operate by having a conversation and going around and asking questions and coming up with ideas until everybody's happy. And I guess you call that consensus, but to me it's way more fun. And it goes back once more to not treating this as a conflict. We treat it as a group of people who are all intelligent and that we trust and that we like and that we're willing and that are willing to advance the conversation with every step.
I think we're just about finished with what we wanted to talk about. So if people have questions, now might be a good time to start that, Caroline.
Yes, and thank you so much. That was so rich. I can believe that you could probably all talk for another few hours and still give us lots and lots of nuggets. So thank you so much. And we will turn it over to questions. And if you have a question, press 1 on your keypad. And I will call on you, unmute you, and you can ask your question. And so while you're putting that together, I did want to check in with Ron Metcalf, because I know you've had your hand up. So, Ron, did you have a question, or is there something we need to address?
Let's see, just a second.
You share about the full worksheet.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ron Metcalf. I don't have my hand up. What does that mean, I have my hand up?
Oh, okay. I see you on the screen, so I was just checking. So, so that's
no,
fine.
No,
there's a number.
we're here.
There's a number 5 by your name, but that could be just from tapping the phone at some time earlier. So, I'll let you go back to listening, and if you have a question, press 1 on your keypad.
I'm here with. There's 3 of us here with Ron.
Okay.
From Transition Thriving Lopez.
Lovely.
Do you know that Lopez Island is in the San Juan Islands, and it's
Yeah.
the newest national monument, the San Juan Island National Monument. We're 10 days old now.
Wow,
you all know that?
congratulations.
Yes. Anyway, we've been we're beyond mulling. We're actually meeting every month, and we have 4 study groups, and they're all aiming for project. One is local financing. Another is transportation, like bicycle paths and maybe horse paths and that sort of thing. We're going to have an electric car show at the Earth Day. We have another group which is water and food security, and the last one is mapping resources. So we're rural transitions as opposed to urban transitions. I mean, we have a little village, but that's about it. Any reflection on, has any of those things, any other transition group ever dealt with what we're dealing with?
In terms of those particular sort of efforts?
Yeah.
I would say yes in various ways. Not sure how to go into any depth in that. Did you have a specific question within that you're wanting to ask the folks, Leo, Joanne, or Susan about?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of ideas from what they've been talking about so we try to have a speaker every month, and we have projects in mind, like the local financing is looking at putting local money together with local needs, and one of the things that first step we're doing is we're we're going to be having a credit union. We don't have on the island is coming to enroll people, and the bonus that they're giving us we're going to have for our treasury. So I just don't know.
It sounds like you've got lots of great things. That maybe a better forum for that is the monthly telesalon. Then you can put forth some specific questions, and I will see if our panelists do have something to respond right now. And then the other thing is we can respond to you after this call as well. If you wanted to write up something and send it in an email, we can post it to participants on this call and have a little discussion going there. So that's what I would suggest. We don't have too much time to dive into everything else, but to our panelists, any comments off the bat?
I'll just say that that is exactly how to do it. You do the projects that you find you do the projects that you find the energy within. The people obviously in your group are excited about that, and that's exactly the kind of thing you want to take advantage of. So yeah, that's great.
I think the local economy issue is one that we have been working with as well, and there's a bunch of people in our area who've joined the Fourth Corner Exchange. I don't know if you guys know about that up on Lopez, but it's a really neat way to do some local economy stuff. Right.
And another thing is, you're so close to Seattle. Visit the folks at Northeast Seattle too, and attend an event and get to know each other. That would be a wonderful thing. You're both in the same region of the world, so it's another suggestion. Over to you, Jim Loving.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking my question, and I guess I'll first just comment. I'm really very impressed with what you've done there in Northeast Seattle. I was out in Seattle last summer for the wedding of my nephew, who lives in Queen Anne's, I guess in the central district of Seattle, and I'm going to tell him about your initiative. But I have a number of questions, and I'll probably have to put them in an email, but let me just sort of rattle out the four of them. I think they're kind of hang together. Where I am is in Silver Spring, Maryland, just a suburb of Washington, D.C., and if you were to go out to the transition site in this region, there are only 3 formal initiatives in the state of Virginia, 2 in the D.C. metro area, 1 down in Stanton. There are none in Maryland, where I live, and there are none in the District of Columbia. There are a few Mullers. Silver Spring, Maryland is in Montgomery County, a population of about 880,000, just northwest of Washington, D.C. So I'm pre-mulling, and I'm really thinking about launching this. So in that context, my questions are, the 3 of you obviously have been together for 5 years. Did you start out as friends that knew one another, or did you only meet through the initiation through one of the 3 of you? The second part related to that in the startup, would you characterize the importance of an organization like Pomegranate, which is Seattle-based, which really has a track record of community building? You said at the beginning, Joanne, that you guys were not experienced at this. How important were they? Was there a cost? Maybe you could comment on that. The third part of the question relates to as you've evolved in your goals, and I'm staring at your mission statement and your goals, I'm going to come back to those. Have you had to involve, you mentioned a number of community organizations, have you involved the government? Have you yet gotten to that point where you're trying to do things that's going to require a zoning change or engagement with the government? And then last but not least, relative to your goals, which I love, did you have or do you have metrics underneath those goals? We want to have so much of this, so much of that. We want to have distributed solar. We want to have a local currency. Have you got that established, and do you kind of write that up? And I can put this all in an email, but thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for the question. This is Joanne. I'll start with the first part of the question, whether we started out knowing one another and were friends. No. I met Susan around her table to talk about this very idea of starting this. She and I had independently inquired to Sustainable Ballard, which was one of the first sustainable groups in Seattle area, about how one went about starting a group. And we were told there was no template, there was no kit. You just sort of had to decide what you wanted to do and start doing it. And it turns out that Susan had made some inquiries, and so we found out about one another. And there was a third woman, Carol, who also had made those inquiries, and the three of us sat down and said, what do we want to do? Do we want to try and do this? Do we think that this will fly? In our first meeting, 45 people showed up. Evidently, there were a lot of people wanting to get something like this started. So so it didn't require that we be friends. We just found one another through sort of mutual inquiries. And Pomegranate, we got to know them, and I can't remember what the reason was. I think we got a small grant early on, if I'm remembering correctly. And we put it out there to the steering committee and anyone else, whether they felt like learning something about community organizing from people who did it professionally would be useful. And 4 of us actually went ahead and took the class. The grant helped pay for it. It wasn't horribly expensive. They've structured it very differently now. They have worked on, it's called Multiple Victories workshops or something, I think. And they've pared it down. We had to go for several weekends, and we learned a lot. They brought in people like Jim Deers, who talks a lot about community organizing from a very hands-on, do it and make it a chainsaw moment kind of perspective. So they were really good. If there's a chance for you to take up that kind of conversation with a group, that's very helpful. It doesn't hurt at all.
The other thing we did pretty much, because this group started in May of 2008, right? And it wasn't a transition initiative originally, but it was right around the time that the transition handbook came out, and in the fall of that year or early winter, that's when Naresh and Sophie were traveling to do the first round of transition trainings. So several of us went to that, and then we also hosted another one in the following year that Joanne went to. So we had the transition training, and I would recommend that if you haven't done that training for transition. As for your third question, we try to involve government officials like city council people. Sometimes we have these movies and we invite them as to watch and participate so they can get an idea of the issues that we're concerned with. But we really haven't, because we're in one corner of the city, we haven't really done much at the city level. So and quite frankly, a lot of the zoning here is very favorable to things like having chickens and ducks in your backyard and growing food on your parking strip. So we haven't really felt a lot of need for that. And as far as metrics, we really haven't. And again, I think it goes to the first thing we were talking about is how do you measure success for your group? And you really do have to think of that, I think, as a moving target, rather than thinking this is something that when we check off these things off the list that we're done, because it's something where you want to think in terms of we never got around to doing an EDAP, and we probably never will, but the idea, if you're thinking 20 years out there, what would we like this community to look like in 20 years? We know that we're not going to be there 15 years from now or a year from now. Everything that we do is just incrementally additive, and it's a cumulative effect where these things build on each other. So rather than thinking of, well, we want to convert so many roofs to solar by such and such a year, I don't know, we've just found it's more organic.
No, I don't have anything.
I was going to say one other thing about the government question. There are so many groups in this town that work on the government to make shifts and changes and things that we have benefited from their work, not having to take it on ourselves. There used to be illegal for you to capture your rain off your own roof, and that has changed, but not because we did anything about that. People put pressure on the city to change those kinds of rules, and chicken allowances were changed because enough people were putting pressure on the community council that they wanted chickens. So those things have happened, but not because of us directly. We have just benefited from it.
Thank you so much. Great questions, Jim. And to you, Rita Bober.
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Did you have a question, Rita?
You talked about getting several grants. Is that the way you said you keep the money in a little shoebox?
No.
How do you get the money to do some of these projects?
Yeah, so because we have a fiscal sponsor, it's an organization called Sustainable Seattle. When we've gotten grants in the past, and most of them have been from the City of Seattle has a really nice, they call it the Neighborhood Matching Funds grant, and so you can get like a $1,000 grant to do an event. And so when we did our first Planet Home festival, we got a $1,000 grant to do that. But it was managed through not a shoebox, which wouldn't have worked very well, but through Sustainable Seattle. So they helped us with all of that stuff before we had a checking account. But usually all the grants have been, other than the one we got for the tool library, which we didn't have to manage that money ourselves. It was, the project was just completed, the work was done, and it was paid for by Cleanscapes. We didn't really see that money at all. So yeah, that's the answer to that one.
Did that answer your question? Hello?
Oh, Judy, go ahead. We're to you now.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. I am wondering about the idea that steering committee in transition towns is supposed to disband at the point of launching. Is that something that you all discussed or did in any way?
Yeah, no. We have not disbanded, and at some point along the way, I mean, we read that in the transition handbook too, and we were like, oh wow, well, we don't want to disband. We like each other. So we really have not followed that advice, and I think that did get changed after a while. We have never done a formal launch.
An unleashing.
Unleashing, right. Yeah, we never really did that, so we haven't had to disband yet. We are hoping eventually that other people might step up and some of us might step back and be less involved, but right now we're pretty much the same group. We've had some people come and go, but right now we're the same group we have been.
Yeah, my understanding of this, doing it for a while, is that I can get where they were coming from with that idea, because you really do want to spread the sense of people doing projects. You want to spread that out so it's not the same people doing the same projects all the time. But I think that you always are going to want to have, as long as the group is around, you're going to want to have some subcommittee or some group of people that are focused on the long-term sustaining of the mission and making sure that all the elements are working and it's getting publicized, and we're addressing all the different quadrants and all the different areas of what would mean resilience in the community. And that's just going to be one group of people that's more of a looking at it holistically. And so I don't see the reason for that to ever want to go away. That's my take.
Yeah, and this is Caroline just chiming in, saying that, even when we had Rob on the call a few weeks ago, Rob Hopkins, who wrote the Transition Handbook, mentioned that, yes, it wasn't the case that the core group or the initiating group just sort of disappears overnight, that, if there is a change, it does take time and management, etc. So, well, thank you for that question, Judy. And we have Janice Lynn.
Oh, hey, here I am in Fort Collins, and I just want to ask you folks in Northeast Seattle what you've been doing specifically for Reconomy. You've mentioned things that I could kind of identify as Reconomy projects, like an exchange that you did on the street, I think. But I'm interested in like what you're doing around any kind of time exchange, sharing economy. I hear some about funding. So could you just give me kind of an overview and particularly if you're doing time exchange, if it's been successful for you?
That's a great question. For us, Reconomy, that whole concept is fairly new, but it's something that with the Transition Companion, that whole idea of trying to almost be an incubator for community-owned assets and kinds of projects like that is something that we are very much thinking about in terms of right now we're really focused on the reorganization and the legal framework for all of that. So it's definitely something we want to do. We haven't done much. I guess the closest thing we have is the tool library, which isn't really cooperative or anything like that, but it is a permanent resource that reduces consumption and is part of the giving economy. That's how we think of it. So it's kind of a first step in that realm. We do have a guild that is a local economy-based guild, and that's what their focus is. And we use a service that Susan mentioned a while ago. It's based in Bellingham, and it's called Fourth Corner Exchange. And it's the idea of trading life dollars, right? That's what they call them. So, you can go online and look that up. But we're those of us who are in that guild are also members of the exchange. And to tell you the truth, I think it's one of those things where, my impression is, it's one of those things where you're trying to build the resources before they're really critically needed. You want to make sure that they're there and that people are enrolled. But the truth is, it's so easy in our present situation to just go to the store and buy something with cash than it is for people to take the time to barter, that it hasn't gotten a huge amount of traction. But that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It's just something that I think we need to keep working on, and it'll be there when we need it more.
There's another organization that's actually sprouted up called Backyard Barter that's kind of citywide, and they're organizing kind of informal barter exchanges throughout the year where people can come and you can bring your plum jam and trade for eggs. But a lot of times now that's happening informally as well as people get to know each other more. Trades are happening that we don't even know about. People trading services, people trading, items that they have made or items that they have grown and that kind of thing. So that's happening all over the town.
And there's also a service online called Free Cycle, which cycles and repurposes stuff. And I've recently been noticing that people are putting things in there like services. Like I can give somebody a haircut if they want to, give me some plants for my garden and that kind of thing. So there's some of that going on around us, and lots of the people that are a part of our organization do that with one another. They swap garden work with one another and swap vegetables in the summertime, put out a table and invite people to come and exchange vegetables and stuff. So there's some of that going on, just sort of naturally occurring.
We have the tool library has a large area that we have set aside for a workshop. So we have the table saws and lathes and all that kind of stuff. And it's fairly new, but we do hope that will turn into not only a place where we can do workshops, but where we can have maker spaces where people can, because ultimately it would be great to have manufacturing locally. And that's definitely something that's on the radar. We just haven't done it yet. Personally, I'd love to see a local aquaponic setup. So there's all kinds of ideas, but we really aren't there yet.
Thank you all. We have our final question, then we'll hear some closing comments from the three of you and wrap it up for today. So Marissa, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you so much. This has been so inspiring and informative. I have two questions for you. One, it seems like you're reaching so many people with all of your different events. I'm wondering how you kind of stay on top of that, stay organized with all the new faces and contact information. If you have a point person for outreach who tries to make people feel welcome, make sure they're coming back, or if it all just kind of happens organically. And then second is if you've done any sort of targeted outreach to try to increase the racial or generational or economic diversity of your group.
Well, this is Joanne. On the outreach, one of the things that our steering committee, I think part of that not disbanding has been helpful in, because we are together and we are a consistent aspect to this group. We sort of take it upon ourselves whenever there's an event or activity going on to be the people who greet new people, to talk to them, engage them in what's going on, what we're about, what we do, that sort of thing. We took on the responsibility as people joined our website. As you have to become a member. It doesn't really mean anything except that you put a password in. But that we can welcome them as they come in, and we were doing that pretty consistently for a while, and then we sort of stopped, we got busy, and then we go back and do it again. So that kind of comes and goes. So it's a little more organic during those periods. But we try to be always aware every time we have anything going on that don't stand around and just chat with the people that you already know. If you see a new face, go say hello and make connections with those people. Invite them in, try and get, whenever we have a new thing going on, I always put out effort or announcements for volunteers, looking for people who are looking for a chance to plug in. This might be your chance, and we always try to really work that announcement through the website and through an email list that people have signed up for at our different events. The outreach for diversity, not anything that's been that targeted, other than when we notice that a particular activity that we do brings in certain people, we take note of that and think, okay, whatever we did there, we need to keep doing that because that drew those people in.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Diversity is a difficult thing. We happen to live in a neighborhood that isn't particularly diverse. And I think what we're trying to focus on is doing things that are in line with our mission and letting people decide for themselves whether they're attracted to that and want to be part of it, because you really can't make people do anything. So we're just trying to create an environment that is appealing to the people that are going to find that appealing.
Thank you. It's been very rich. I just wanted to give you, all three of you, a chance for any closing comments if you have those.
Yeah, this is Susan. I want to thank you, Caroline, for organizing this and for all of the work that you're doing to keep transition alive in the United States. I think some of the things that you guys are doing are really fabulous, and I was on the phone call with Rob Hopkins a couple weeks ago, and it was just so great to hear his voice. I think I don't really have much to say except just to sort of reach out a hand for support. If you guys on the phone call have questions and want to talk more, I'm sure we'd be glad to answer more questions, or maybe also to hear your ideas. If you have any thoughts for us about things we're doing, we'd be more than happy to hear those. So just to shout out to everyone who's working so hard to make transition happen. I know it's not always easy, and it's not always fun. So, but it's just great to have other people interested in working in Maryland and Lopez and Fort Collins and wherever else everyone is. So thanks so much for listening in today.
I guess I would just add a little encouragement to especially the people who are just trying to figure out how to get it all started. That is to just know that you don't have to do it all at once, and you don't have to get hung up on trying to achieve the big picture. Just try to take incremental steps and enjoy the process and have fun while you're doing it.
This is the best thing that happens in my day, is seeing the people that are around this phone and that I do things with in this community. And I would just say, if you're passionate about this and you love it, then you will draw those people to you, and you will enjoy the time that you're doing it. And it won't feel like work. It will feel like joy.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you three very much for participating today and talking about Sustainable Northeast Seattle and all of the great work you're doing there and all of the inspiring efforts and projects.